This is episode 7 of Pucks, Putts, and Properties. Got Danny Taylor with me and a special guest to kick us off here this morning with Melissa Forman of Centum Mortgages. Thanks for joining us, Melissa. I know we've got some big news. Yeah, we've got some big news in the mortgage world. But before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit about Christmas leading up. And Linus, our broker, put a AI soundtrack together for Danny and I. I'm going to play that just because it is so awesome. Melissa, you were here at the office Christmas party on Friday when that song was introduced. Tell us about what you heard and saw.
Well, I heard and saw it because everybody was so distracted by yakking. I think it played 18 times, maybe. It was pretty entertaining. I feel like it's one of those things, every time you listen to it, you pick up something else as well. So Unfortunately, you weren't here, Danny, to listen to the debut of it. But
no, I was away with Boston for a hockey trip there. But no.
So I'm super excited about it because Danny and I now have an intro and an outro to the podcast within some of the song lyrics. But what Melissa hasn't seen yet is I actually put a video to it. So I'm going to let it roll right now for everyone.
Snow is falling, fire's blazing, Christmas cheer is in the air. Danny Taylor, kids are racing, presents piled up everywhere. Mark's by the fire sipping whiskey, thinking about the year gone by. Pucks, Putts, and Properties podcast, reaching for the Christmas sky. Agents of romance so true, Danny and Mark, seeing them through. Mark the curler, the golfer, the fisherman bold, Danny the goalie, with a story to be told. Worked every job you can imagine, a spirit so free, always lending a hand, a friend you'd always wanna be. Danny with his hockey stories and a house full of delight, always there for a neighbor, shining ever so bright. Two real estate agents of romance so true, Danny and Mark, seeing them through. Mark the curler, the golfer, the fisherman bold, Danny the goalie, with a story to be told. From the closing table to the Christmas tree, their friendship's a gift for all the world to see. Compassionate souls with hearts of gold, a Christmas story, a tale to be told. Two real estate agents of romance so true, Danny and Mark, seeing them through. Mark the curler, the golfer, the fisherman bold, Danny the goalie, with a story to be told. Merry Christmas, Danny and Mark, may your friendship forever spark. Pucks, Putts, and Properties, a Christmas toast to you.
beautiful.
Well done, AI. Hey?
Oh, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It actually sounds like Dean Brody, like the singer, the country singer. Is it? That's who it is?
I don't know.
Linus put
Linus
it together.
created.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was awesome.
Yeah, and
He
obviously
said
we
did a
thank.
whole bunch of them, but that's the only one that turned out.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
So
I
obviously
asked
we
him
thank Linus for that one there. Obviously pretty awesome. I love those goalie shots of you in there, Danny.
It feels like forever ago, but it wasn't that long ago, like 5 years.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I found that clip in the dressing room in Ottawa, and I'm like, stories about being a goalie. I'm like, perfect. Drop that in there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's some good ones. It was a good clip. It's really, we'll have to make a rendition of that for not just the Christmas one, but for the everyday. But it's not about this, the music video. Let's talk about Melissa and mortgages. Yes,
Okay.
the new rate announcement. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, well, we have lots of announcements that have come up because there's been 2 changes that have been implemented as of yesterday, December 15th, the Sunday of all things, right? That were put into place. They were announced around August of this year. The first one, do you want me to just get right into them? The first one.
Off you go.
Okay, so it's mainly focuses around first-time home buyers. And we're going to talk about insured mortgages a lot. So insured mortgages are anything when you put less than 20% down, you have to buy mortgage insurance, but you get a few bonuses. Your mortgage is backed by the government if you default. So it's good for the lender. So you do get a better rate. So you do have to pay that mortgage insurance, but there's a better rate that comes with it as well. So the first time home buyers, as of yesterday, you are allowed, if you're putting down 5%, 10%, anything less than 20, you can extend your amortization out to 30 years. So from 25 to 30. And the benefits of that is greater affordability because we're spreading our payments out. That's what they base affordability on, right? When we look at everything, what are we already paying? What is our mortgage going to cost us in our property taxes? And so when we spread those payments out, we spread out our affordability. So you could qualify for a house possibly if you couldn't before, or you could qualify for a greater amount. This downfall of that is obviously we're paying a mortgage longer and we're paying more interest in the long term. But it is a really great thing for first-time home buyers. They're also giving it to people who are purchasing new builds. So you can have an insured deal, less than 20% down on a new build, and have that amortization. So the entire length of your mortgage spread out to 30 years. Okay.
Nice.
And then the other one that came into effect yesterday is an increase of purchase price. So since 2012, they haven't made any changes to this, but the prices of houses have changed tremendously. So it is something that they really had to look at. So as of yesterday, insured purchases had to be under $1 million. They've upped that to 1.5 million now. So they've just extended that out $500,000, and that gives people more options when they're looking if they have less than 20%. However, we still have to qualify for these things. Like you still have to underwrite it, and same qualifications. That doesn't change. It just gives a little bit more flexibility when people are out shopping. Mm-hmm. Not as fun as your music video, I know. Mortgage talk.
No, it's really good. This is big news for first-time home buyers, right? We can extend to 30 years.
Yeah, I have a few people that have come to me and they're looking to start shopping again. They've looked in the past and they're looking to start shopping again because of these changes, right? It piques interest and helps people afford things, and they want to get out of paying rent. So
an uninsured mortgage will typically have a higher rate than an insured mortgage. Is that correct?
Typically, yeah. If you're getting, there's like pockets of percentages that you can put down. So if you're putting down more than 35%, then you're getting a better rate again.
Okay. Well, can you lead into the latest interest rate cut and what your thoughts are on that and what that means?
So there was an interest rate, as everyone knows, there was an announcement on Wednesday. It was December 11th. It's always on Wednesdays. And I predicted that it was going to be 0.5. There's a few reasons why I picked that. Yeah, you picked it. You're like, I'm picking it just because I'm being optimistic. I picked it for a few reasons. Unemployment's really, really high, right? Especially in Ontario, but throughout Canada, like we're seeing greater, not necessarily in all provinces, but it is high. And since the beginning of the year, we've seen 20,000 manufacturing jobs lost. So unemployment is increasing, as well as the debt in Canada is higher than it's ever been. People owe more money than they've ever owed in history in Canada. So for those reasons, I thought that they were going to be more aggressive on their policy cut. So they did decrease that by 0.5%. Now this affects variable mortgage. A lot of people are confused because clients will always get a hold of me and they'll be like, oh, I'm getting a mortgage and there was a cut yesterday and I close in a couple of weeks. Can I get the better rate? Well, no, because you're taking a fixed rate. So it affects variable rates. There are some linear things along the way, but all in all, they're completely separate for the most part. So one doesn't affect the other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was a big announcement. Our next announcement is January 24th, 2025. And I honestly think that we'll see cuts continue throughout next year. But I do think that at some point, depending on what unemployment looks like, depending on what inflation looks like, we'll see some pauses. Inflation's really under control. We want it between that 1% and 3%, and we're sitting around 2 right now, so 2.2. So it's exactly where it needs to be. But I do think that they will take some pauses as things start to flatline out, because it takes a while to see what the effects are of these policy cuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion.
So when it comes to fixed rates, we should be tracking the bond yields, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And
What are
where
they
do
doing
you
right
like
now?
where do you go to find those? Like it seems like we're always tracking the Bank of Canada overnight rate. Like
I think people track it for a few reasons. It affects the here and now, right? Like if you have a
Mhm.
HELOC or a variable mortgage, it affects you in that moment. For some people, now not all mortgages that people get, if they have a variable, that doesn't necessarily mean they come down. It depends who your lender is. And people don't realize that when they get into it. They're like, oh, it'll go up and down as it happens, but not necessarily. But yeah, the fixed rates are affected by the Canadian bond yield. You can just do a Google search and it'll come up. If you're really into watching the stock market, I mean, it does change, obviously, daily, hourly, but they're not as aggressive on making those changes just when there's something that happens or it drops a lot or comes up a lot. Things that happen in the United States affect our Canadian bond yield because you remember when the banks fell and crashed? There was a bank that crashed in the United States. Well, everybody thought that their economy was unstable, so they pulled money out and dumped it into our economy, and the Canadian bond yield they invested in it. So our rates went down because of that, right? It depends on what happens globally. Obviously, wars and the United States affects us a lot as well. So there's all kinds of driving factors with the bond yield.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So talk a bit more about how first-time buyers get into the market and qualify on your end, Melissa, and why Danny and I would certainly feel like you're the starting point in the whole process.
Yeah, I definitely think that you do need to talk about mortgages before you go look at houses, because you can't shop in your range if you don't know what your range is, right? What your options are. Do I need to put a cosigner on? We're seeing a lot of cosigners go on mortgages right now, and they are fully underwrote just like anybody else. So all their documents are collected as well. They're just as responsible for the mortgage. But yeah, I do budget sheets for my clients. We give them different scenarios. They go out shopping. I can put on the specific house, because there's things that change it. Like our rates are changing constantly. We talked about this today, Mark. Like taxes are so our property taxes also affect our affordability as well. So we have to look at all these different variables. So getting a pre-approval or talking to a mortgage person and seeing what you can afford is definitely step one, in my opinion. I imagine you guys are the same, because you don't want to waste anybody's time, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some things, if you've been sitting on the sidelines as a buyer, what are some things that you should not do before buying a house?
After we sign all those documents, before we close, I say to my clients, don't buy anything with credit ever. So before you close, don't go buy new furniture or new fridge and put it all on credit, because that can definitely affect your affordability. And I haven't personally seen it, because I'm full disclosure to my clients, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. So but you could totally shoot yourself in the foot, definitely.
And a car,
New
as well.
BMW.
Don't buy a car. If you want to
buy
buy a house in the future, don't have $1,000 car payments. And you think I'm kidding, but I'm not.
Yeah.
It happens.
I've heard stories too of people not being able to close on closing day because they bought a car during those 60 days between when they got that agreement of purchase and sale signed and to when they close. So it's blown up the deal, and it can really affect your
Because
life down
all
the road.
affordability is
Yeah.
there's two different numbers that they look at. One, they have to, and they compare it against your income. One is your mortgage payment, your taxes, and $100 worth of heating costs, because they want to make sure you can afford it. It has to be under 39%. And the other one is all of those things plus the payments that you're already obligated to make: car payments, line of credit, student loans. Now, student loans are a completely different animal. So if you're looking to pay off debt for affordability, talk to a mortgage person, because they're going to walk you through that. They don't really hold the same merit as other debts do. But yeah, line of credit, credit cards, car payments are such a big one, right? Because people, it's shiny and people buy them and they can afford the payments, but then they go to buy a house and they can't afford. But that one has to be under 44%. That's why when we're spreading out that amortization, the affordability becomes more, because you're spreading out payments, so your payments are less. So it's all about affordability.
Can we talk about how many rate cuts we have seen in 2024 and what that percentage was from the start of when we started cutting rates? Because we were up to what, almost 7% at one point?
I don't think it was that high. That's a Google search for me.
Yeah, because we've seen what, 4 consecutive rate decreases, the last two being 0.5%.
They've cut every time, in the last 4 to 5 cuts. And it's been, they started off pretty light, just with 0.25, but the last 2 cuts have been 0.5, which you can see that they are being more aggressive. But we have those things in place, like inflation's where it needs to be. We're seeing unemployment really high. So everything that those policy increases were supposed to do, they did. They wanted things to be unaffordable, so people stopped shopping. They needed people to stop spending money and just hold on, so our economy slowed down, because everything was on fire in COVID. It was really hot. People were out there shopping, spending money, using debt. Money was cheap, right? So they increased that to get everything to be really expensive, so people can't afford anything. So our inflation has come right down, and because things are more expensive and people aren't shopping as much, we're seeing a lot of jobs being cut. So it's bad, but it's good. It's what they expected. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, for sure. As things start to balance out, which we've seen, they'll start to slow down on those rate cuts, because we're kind of at that peak of rate cutting right now.
Because we're almost right now in the midst of people having to refinance their home for people that bought during COVID.
Yeah, that'll be next year, and especially
Next year.
2026 for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, their renewals will be coming up, and I do see a lot of people that have purchased and maybe went out and did some construction on their house, and now they're in a position where they want to amalgamate those payments, but they can't, because they don't have the equity in their house, because their houses aren't worth what they were, right? And there are a lot of people struggling financially out there that we see every day. But there's also a lot of people doing really well. Like a lot of millennials they've learned how to save and budget, and they're doing a great job. But yeah, there are people on the other end of the spectrum, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So I kind of want to highlight the vastness of your toolbox, Melissa. You have lots of tools in the box, and getting people who traditionally would struggle to get a mortgage, some of the things that you're able to do for them, like self-employed professionals sometimes struggle in getting financing, and how people should consider reaching out to you in those circumstances.
Yeah, I have the ability, because I am a mortgage agent, so I don't work for the lenders, I work for clients. So I have a lot of different lenders that I look. I obviously do those prime space, like your typical nurses and police officers that have income. They get T4s, are gorgeous. But then we do self-employed, and there's different kinds of self-employed as well. Like we have people who run businesses. We have people like you guys that you're commission based. So how that's underwrote might not be something that the bank likes to look at. So there's a lot of different options, as well as I also do private financing. So short term, people sometimes get themselves in, and no fault of their own, they get themselves in situations where they need to pay for a mortgage, and they can't get a traditional loan. I can do that as well. There's alternative lending. There's all sorts of different things that we're able to do. I think Jason said the other day, we have about 100 different lenders that we look at. So short-term bridge loans, and you can't get a bridge loan from a bank if you're not getting a mortgage. So I can set you up with that. So if you have a house that you haven't closed on, but you've purchased something else and you just need to bridge that for, they say 2 weeks, there's abilities to do that. It's expensive. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's going to cost you, but
Sorry, do you look at 100 different banks on the short-term mortgages or on the bridge loan, or just on the B lenders as well?
So I
like,
have
prime
my
mortgages?
prime lenders. We used
Yeah.
to call them A, B, and C, but people don't like that anymore, right? Because it sounds not very nice. But everybody needs different options out there, for sure. And so we have our prime lenders that we look at, and that includes big banks. Like I also have big banks in my tool belt, as well as something called monolines, which are billion-dollar companies that deal strictly in mortgages. I like them personally because I've had a lot of people come to me. I had an email on the weekend, like people looking to break their mortgages. If they're not with a bank and they're with a monoline, it's going to be a lot cheaper, even with a fixed rate. So I do like them because it gives people options. Nobody reads the fine print until they need to. I'm telling you. So that's what I'm here to do. So we have our prime lenders. We have alternative lenders, which are people who are self-employed, commission or business, those sorts of things. Alternative income, right? And then we also have our private side, which is just like, say, Danny, you had $500,000 in the bank, you're looking to make some money. You could technically lend it to me so I could close on a property, right? So it's just, there are companies that do that, but then we also have people that do that individually on our side.
And
So
for people that don't know, the prime banks are your CIBC, TD, Royal Bank, BMO, and they're government backed, right? And like they'll have only a certain amount of mortgages that they can provide. Does that sound about right?
If they have the money, yeah. But you're also backing it when you're insured as well.
Right. So. But do private lenders back it as well? Like they can get insured mortgages on the private side, or that's uninsured? Okay. Yeah. It's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to have, when you're looking at privates, you need to have some skin in the game. That's why they want to see. Doesn't matter what your house is worth. Well, it does matter what it's worth, but you got to have some equity in there. No one's going to lend you 100% loan to value.
No.
Tell us about the intricacies in people that want to get an investment property.
Again, same thing. So we have to have 20% down. So you have to have some skin in the game unless you're living in the property. So there's options too out there with people who maybe they're buying a duplex and they want to rent out their basement or vice versa. And you can put down 5% for a duplex if you're going to live in that property, which is a great option for first-time home buyers that are also looking to invest. And the income that comes in with the rent, you can use that 100% fed back to your gross income. So it can help you qualify, which typically for regular rentals that are its own unit, say you bought a townhouse in the East End and you want to use that, you can only use 50% of that income, and you have to put down 20%. So it's a bit of an investment. It's just basic underwriting, affordability.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great information for people that are out there on the sidelines. Like, what a better way to pay off your own mortgage than have you rented out the basement or top half and it's paying your mortgage, or at least a percentage of it.
It's definitely a great option if you're young and you want to eventually own properties, because it's a passive income, right? We always look at our jobs as going to work every day and busting our butt and having to be there. But this is just, you have to make sure your rent's collected and you may have to flip it, cut the lawn, whatever, but you're basically sitting back and building equity and somebody else is paying it off. So rentals are a great option.
Yeah.
Can you do me a favor? We'll finish it off with this, Melissa. Can you reach for that crystal ball there?
My crystal ball?
Yeah.
I don't bring this out too often. Just for the note, we were playing with this earlier, all of us. It's heavier than it looks. I have no tricks. I don't hold it very often.
Well, you're going to hold it right now because I'm going to put you on the spot here. What do you foresee as far as the next few rate announcements? Do you think we'll continue to see half percentage point cut, a quarter, and then more for Danny and I? But certainly we feel like right now is a great time for buyers, because as these rates continue to be cut, it's logical to think that we could start to see a really, really active spring and potentially see, again, a trickle back up in prices. I don't personally think that we're going back to peak market prices where we were, 3.5 years ago. But I think it's reasonable to think that with these changes, we will see an uptick.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. I think a few things are going to happen, and it depends on where unemployment stays. It depends on where inflation stays. It depends on what happens globally. So it's hard to like fully predict this stuff. I do think that they will start easing up on these cuts. I will probably see them cut them. Well, we will definitely see them cut them further in 2025. No, there's no question there. However, they will possibly take a pause here and there just to see the effects down the road. There's all kinds of other numbers that come out to be able to fully see what they're going to do and why they're going to do it. If you and yeah, the changes that they've made as of yesterday, I do think that they will help people get out there and get shopping. I think we're going to see a great spring. I do also believe that the changes that they made are slightly inflationatory. Like they're going to see maybe an increase in house prices as well. Maybe not so much in Kingston, but definitely in the GTA area. Like we're bringing that insured from 1 million to 1.5 million. Obviously, we don't have the average house price in Kingston. What is like 650,000? So it may not affect us as much, but yeah, it will be interesting to see the changes. Is it all good? No. Is it all bad? No. I do think we'll see a lot better of a spring than we saw this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a great message for buyers because I do think now's the time before.
Oh, I agree. And you know what? I'm seeing it. I'm seeing a ton of first-time home buyers jumping out and getting their pre-approvals done and filling out their applications for sure.
Good. Yeah, that's awesome.
So, Danny, I think at this point we can introduce our guests that we're bringing on. You've got a deep history with them, so I'll let you take over there.
Yeah, really excited for this one. Michael Ouzas, he's a real estate agent in Toronto. He was a goaltender for 15 professional seasons. I played against him in the Ontario Hockey League. We've played in a number of similar places, similar leagues. Great realtor, great human being. He shared some really insightful information on what's going on in Toronto, which sometimes has a trickle effect down here in Kingston. And he's got some great information, great stories, and should be a banger.
Danny and I would like to welcome our next guest on the Pucks, Putts, and Properties podcast, Michael Ouzas. He's a Toronto-based realtor, and we're really looking forward to this discussion. Michael's also a former professional goalie, much like Danny, so I'll let the two of them kick it off here.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Yeah, thanks.
This has been a long time coming. For a lot of people that don't know, we used to spend almost at least once a week. Would you say, Uzi, at the Elkin Goalie School?
Yeah, at least for many years too, right? It was a long time. So it's kind of cool. We played kind of alongside, like we're similar age. So over the years in pro, and then kind of got into real estate not too far apart from each other too. So similar journeys, that's for sure.
What inspired your transition from being a professional athlete to becoming a realtor? What was the draw for you? And were you straight out of being a professional goalie into real estate?
Yeah. So for me, I've always kind of wanted to get into real estate. It's something I started investing as I was playing, but also my father's a realtor in Hamilton, which is probably about 50 kilometers away from Toronto. So it's not too far. My parents have always been in real estate, whether they're renovating properties or obviously my dad is a realtor. And then it's not really something that was on my radar when I was younger. I really wanted to get into training and went to school for kinesiology and stuff. But as I grew older and started investing in properties and started to really understand real estate, I was like, you know what, I really like that business. And I do love the elements of real estate. So it's something that when COVID hit, it gave me the option to do the courses online. I know you guys are in Kingston, so it's it'd be the same courses, right, for Ontario through Humber now. So I always wanted to get my license as I was playing, because then I wanted to just buy and sell for myself as I was going. Lucky I didn't at that time, I guess. Now, it's not that easy to just do that as you go along. But so my last year, I started the courses because they went to Humber and I could do them while I was playing in Europe. Ended up getting injured like midway through the year and tried coming back, came back a little bit early, got hurt again. And I was like, you know what, it's for me, I was 35 at the time. And I know you guys could attest to this. Like once you start I kind of felt like I had far reached my peak at that point, and I was kind of on the trickle down, and I was like, you know what, it's not really worth it to try to rehab back. I had a concussion, and I was like, you know, I'm 35, like it's kind of time. And so I basically retired midway through the season when the team bought me out. I just came home and finished off my license and interviewed brokerages and went from there.
That's awesome.
What skills,
Yeah,
and I'll open this up to both you guys just because your backgrounds are so similar. What skills from your hockey career have been most valuable in your success as a real estate agent?
It's funny. Danny and I always talk about this. It's like you're playing the same game, but a different sport. Really, the skills, especially as a goalie, I feel like translate so well. A lot of it, like, you know, I'd equate the, you know, when you're putting in offers or you're accepting offers, if you're representing the seller, very similar to like when you're playing games. But everything else that you do along the way, the practices, the training, the monotony of like going to the gym every day, the stuff that you just kind of do because you know you have to, and no one ever sees that stuff, and it's not flashy or by any means, but that kind of stuff is so similar to this business. And then just the resilience piece of, you know, you win, you lose, you just kind of wake up the next day. You got to keep your team like motivated, like as a player, like, you know, you got to show your especially as a goalie, you got to show your, you know, your vibes are still good, and that, you know, whether you win or lose, you got to show up the next day. And same kind of thing in real estate. Like if your clients lose on offers, which, you know, depending on which market we're in, if there's multiple offers, it happens that you're going to lose on offer night. So you have to kind of find ways to keep your clients motivated, stay positive, and also show up the next day for yourself to do the right things, to keep the needle moving, and just kind of doing all the stuff that you know you need to do that's not flashy, and you just kind of have to do it to be able to perform.
What about you, Danny?
Yeah, those are great answers. And I would tell, yeah, we've talked about it before over the phone a number of times, how we were just like, everything is very similar with what we're doing now in real estate. But when we were playing, and it's funny, I'm looking at your hockey DB, and the years are long, and good for you. I mean, you retired at 35. And I know I'd love to go back a little bit because we played in the OHL at the same time. And we've played on very similar teams in similar places. You've played in Mississauga, obviously Medvešak and Zagreb, Austria, East Coast, handful of teams. Can you talk about a little bit about your travel experience, and you know what you've learned over the years going from North America and Europe, and basically what your biggest takeaways were from that?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, and obviously, like we started pro at the same time. If you remember that year, I think I started a year after you did for pro because I went to school first, but we ended up meeting in Reading again in the East Coast, and I got shipped out to Fresno. The team folded halfway through the year. I got shipped back to Reading, and then I think you went to the American League. That like was amazing for you because then you took off there, and in Reading, like the coach got fired like the next week. And, you know, it was just I went from like literally the best team in the league to like the worst team in the league because the best team folded and the worst team was like just fired their coach. And it was a very like.
So we were teammates. I thought we were never teammates. I thought we always played against each other, but we were teammates for a handful of.
We were just in there for like training camp. I don't think we ever like actually dressed up together, right? Remember it was camp and Toronto and LA split goalies at that time. It was brief though. It was brief. I got shipped out like really quick. So yeah, it was it was an interesting adventure, but same kind of thing. Like you just kind of have to, I think the biggest thing especially when you turn pro for the first time is like, you're pretty naive to what's going on. You really have no clue. Like obviously everybody wants to play and be the guy but you really have no clue, like the bigger picture of what's going on. And I think when you're going through it and you're just trying to do your best with the information you're given, and you just keep kind of rolling. And then from there to Vegas, from Vegas to Croatia. When I got to Zagreb, it was like same kind of thing. Like you get there and you're like, what is happening here? Amazing place to play. It was a great city. It was a great, like, everything was great about the setup there and everything. But it was like, when I first arrived, Vaughn, I was getting my gear from Vaughn, and they're like, you know what, we're just going to ship the gear to Zagreb for you, save you the, like, 2 sets of gear is a lot of baggage, right? And at that time, it was my first contract. I didn't have like big like I didn't know really what to negotiate. And I remember getting there the first day, and this is like before iPhones were just getting popular. It was like iPhone like 4, like it just like kind of getting rolling. We all had Blackberries, didn't have internet on the phone. Like we're using like paper map to get around the city of Zagreb, which you've been to Zagreb. Like there's no way you're getting anywhere without like Google Maps in that city. Like, like it's there's no street signs. So
no.
Anyway, we get there, we're driving, and it's first practice at the practice arena, which that was an interesting spot. But then my gear was at the post office. So I went to the post office and I was like, hey, I literally got there. This guy's behind the counter, like having his coffee. It's 9:30 a.m. Like clearly had no intention of dealing with two English only speaking people. There's a huge box that says Vaughn, like right behind his desk. Like literally, like I could see the box. It's clearly my gear. And I'm like, hey, like, I'm just here to pick up my gear and go. And he's like, sutra. He's like, which is tomorrow in Croatian. Like, basically, you wanted nothing to do with that box that was, probably like 3 feet by 3 feet. Like, it's full of goalie gear.
Yeah.
So I leave there. Like, the guy would not give me my gear. So I went to the arena, and the trainer there was like, oh, yeah, I'm goalie. Like, you can use my gear. I'm like, what do you mean? So I only had like skates, a mask, and like, little peripheral stuff, but like pads, chest protector, gloves, like all the good stuff that you really want for practice is in that box at the post office. So my first practice there, I literally wore, like, first practice ever in Europe, new team, new coach, new everything. I'm wearing the trainer's goalie gear. Like paper thin chest protect, any puck off the chest, like you're like, get me off this ice. Like this is like just the best. But that was my first intro to Zagreb.
Can we talk about the practice rink? Because I know what you're talking about in Zagreb. I've got PTSD from that practice.
And you can't see because there's no curtains on the windows. So like all the light shines right at the one net. So like I couldn't see the puck, and I had this guy's gear on. It was an absolute
it's like almost like the West Edmonton Mall where the sunlight is just beaming in, and it's like when you're looking at the ice, it is literally like a flashbang.
Yeah. So the next day they go with the GM to the mail thing, and he's like all buddy. They're like, hey, like it's like, oh yeah, no problem. Grabs the box, puts it over the thing, like 2 seconds. I was like, oh my goodness, what a mess.
I know. And that's
that was my first intro. But kind of to your question on the travel is like each city and each place is so unique, right? And every year is unique. Different guys, different maybe different coaches, different goalie coaches, different team, like
languages.
And the real thing that we do as players that we don't really think about at the time, but we just adapt. You just kind of like figure it out and you go. And that's why I do feel like the translation to real estate is the same kind of thing. Like you're just adapting. You're adapting with technology. You're adapting with different markets. In Toronto, for example, like we go from a buyer's market to a seller market, like before anyone really knows it's happening. But if you're in it every day, like, you're starting to be in competition on certain properties. And then all of a sudden one comes up every 2 weeks, and now you're competing against 7 offers like that. Like it really just kind of turns quickly, and you have to be able to adapt right away and best guide your clients based on whatever's going on. So that's where, like, throughout all the travels and hockey and all the lessons, like the adaptability piece is really huge.
Yeah. And totally out of curiosity, not related to real estate, but you mentioned setting up contracts with equipment providers. How does that, in your guys' experience, how does that change based on what level of hockey you're playing? I don't even know what those look like, right?
Yeah. So Danny, you might have had did you ever have like sponsorship with equipment providers
No,
or
there
through
was
the team?
certain companies that I think that you had to use. I know college you had to, and then the OHL you were kind of led to use like the Coho CCM. But like I remember trying to get gear over in Europe, and it was exactly that. It was like, do you ship it over? Do you bring it over? And like that was probably a lot more difficult when you're playing over in Europe. Like a lot of guys would just get money allocated in their contract, and then they wouldn't even submit receipts because trying to get money back on your gear was a bit a bit of an issue sometimes in the KHL. But anyway, setting up the gear stuff. I got really lucky with the people that I worked with that were represented by the companies. That they were really good and they treated me really well. I don't know what you can speak about.
Same thing. We never had like a gear contract. Like, so it's not like I had to wear any particular gear, but they would like, you kind of like what you like. And if you're ordering from the same people, like the same reps every year, like they're really good about making sure you have what you need when you need it. And it was after Zagreb, like when I went to Austria, it was all like great. It was like, show up at training camp, the gear's all in your stall. Like there's an actual rep that represents, I was wearing Vaughn at the time, and then CCM, like those guys like show up at the rink and they're like, they're the German and Austrian reps. So like they weren't messing around. Like your gear was there when you needed it. It was really nice. And
it was like a
and
real
then basically in the contract,
no
you're just trying to negotiate what you can for like the gear that you want. So like if you need a couple sets or whatever, you can put that in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the differences in our two markets. So Kingston, we're probably 120, 130,000. And then Toronto, I don't know what its population would be, probably 4 or 5 million.
I think it's about, I mean, it feels like it changes all the time. I think we're about 4.5 to 5 in the city and about 8 kind of greater Toronto area, give or take. It's a big range. Like the greater Toronto area, like is quite big. Like you're looking from like Burlington to almost on the other side of Durham, almost up to Barrie. So it's like it's a huge space. I know Danny knows the area well. Like there's a lot of ground there to cover.
Yeah, so the greater GTA is probably like 10 million then.
Yeah.
So we're vastly different markets. I deal a lot with rural properties, which I'm sure Michael, you maybe have dealt with it, but it wouldn't be the common thing that you're dealing with. So Danny and I are often looking at septics and wells, and Danny did an off-grid sale there last week. So our day-to-day is, I mean, very similar, but what we see on a day-to-day would be very different. Give us sort of an overview on your Toronto market right now.
Yeah, so right now we're kind of in a tale of 3 markets, give or take. We were a tale of 2 markets, but I feel like that's shifted over the last probably a few weeks now. So essentially we have the freehold market, and I'll talk specifically like about the core downtown or like Toronto proper. So if you're looking for a freehold property, like a semi-detached or a detached property in the city, we always have low inventory for that type of property. And what we're seeing right now is the stuff that's nice, that's a good product, that's priced accurately, is selling within days to a week. If it's overpriced, it will sit. And if it needs a ton of work, it's also going to sit. So that's where we're kind of finding that freehold market is in that place right now. The condo market's a totally different animal right now. We're seeing the smaller stuff, like maybe with not so great layouts, taking much longer to sell. But we are seeing the bigger stuff with better layouts that, again, pricing is so big right now. Like if it's priced really well and it's a really functional layout, and maybe you're getting a product right now at $900 a square foot versus the peak of the market was like $1,100 or $1,200 a square foot. That's a really good price for that property. Mm-hmm. And those properties are getting attention today. I've been in multiple offers twice this month based on properties of higher level properties, but the functionality of the layout is great. And the location is amazing. And yeah, you're getting it at a price that I'd argue is a really good price at $900 a square foot. So those are kind of three different markets. The small stuff that doesn't have, we kind of sometimes you judge a condo by where can you put a TV? Like, can you even put a couch and a TV in it? And there are some units that you can't. Literally, your TV would be like where your sink is on your counter, because like the kitchen goes to the end. So it's like that type of property is not getting a ton of attention right now. Buyers do have choice, and they're certainly being pickier of the layouts that they buy, and they should, because they have that choice. 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago now, I guess, at the peak of 2022, basically a condo would come up every week and we were in competition for it. Right now, we're at about 6 to 7 months of inventory. It's come back a little bit. We're like kind of in the high fives right now for the core. But there could be a lot of properties that just came off for the holidays. So I'm hesitant to kind of say like that's like we're trending downwards in months of inventory. We are, but it's tough to say if that's holiday driven or December driven versus is that actually the reality. We'll know a little bit more on that in kind of January, February.
Yeah.
What would you say the factors are that led to such high inventory, certainly within the condo market and properties sitting so long?
I think there's a couple factors. Of course, the rates, that was a big factor. Like rates right now are 2% cheaper than where they were a year ago. So that's a big element. And I think that there's a lot of investors who have been, like we do have, I think it's 70% properties in the market are either vacant or tenanted at the moment. So that's a good amount of most likely investor driven inventory. And if that's the case, then that's where we saw a pop in inventory at that point. And again, if that pulls back, we will start seeing competition, and we are seeing it in the best layouts in the city, even in smaller units and price points. And as of late, probably in the last 2 to 3 weeks right now, we're starting to see like the lower end price points with good layouts. Those properties are starting to move a little bit too.
That's good. We were seeing it all over social media with the drop in condos and how condos were crashing. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know there's people that are saying that people are buying these condos that are pre-sale before they're even constructed and then try to sell them to make a profit. But it seemed like, can you speak a little bit about that? Like, this is just we all hear on social media, but someone like yourself sees
absolutely. So right now the pre-sale market is an interesting one, and we're so fortunate at our office, our brokerage, they bring in Sean Hildebrand from Urbanation, which is like the biggest data-driven company out there, especially when it comes to condos. And the reports are so detailed. And the biggest thing right now with the pre-construction market is the pricing is so much higher than the resale pricing. We're talking about almost 50% difference. Like right now, if you want to buy in the downtown core of Toronto, most of the projects that are coming up are anywhere between $1,400 and $2,000 a square foot. Across the street, you could buy the same layout condo for anywhere between $900 and $1,100 a square foot. So you're looking at about call it on average a $500 premium per square foot for essentially the same location. Of course, maybe not as new and shiny, but it still has like a similar layout, or it's still a condo, right? So if you can find something that's in a really good building in that location and get a $400 to $500, call it, I don't know, I can't really call it a discount, but you get what I'm saying. Like it's a $400 to $500 difference in the pricing. That's why the pre-construction market is really not taking off, because the price to build and the cost to build is so high, and those pricings are reflected on the sales centers, and it's really tough to move product at such a premium.
Yeah, can you see a lot of these developers then going under with some of these buildings that need to sell at around $1,200 to $1,400 a square? Like, will they just not build it if they can't get their numbers? Or
tough to say. I do believe it's 70% sales that they have to achieve to get the financing to construct in Canada. I believe that's the number. So if that's the case, and we're seeing it is one of the slowest pre-sale years of all time. So there's an element there, but essentially if the cost to build is $1,400 to $1,500 a square foot, and And in the data we just received, the profit margin's only between 9 and 12%. So if that's the case, I mean, there's not really much wiggle room there for a builder to be able to lower the prices by $300 a square foot. It just doesn't exist. So if that doesn't change, then it'll be really, really difficult to deliver these products. And there are some properties are still getting some attention, but overall the amount of sales is very low. And that's where, like it says, the condos are crashing. But that a lot of those articles are mostly for the pre-sale market.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like everyone talks about, you know, affordability or more housing. Well, it doesn't sound like, you know, the cost of construction is going down. So I don't know how the prices would, right? So
exactly.
You know, we got to.
Yeah, tell us about how your background as a professional athlete allows you to really manage yourself in such a fast-paced market. I imagine some days you get back home like late in the evening and just ask yourself, what did I do today? What happened? How has your background really helped you in that Toronto market as a realtor?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much that really relates, because you can't really, when you play hockey, it's pretty, like, you're so routine. Like, you're so like, and I love that. Like, I love, like, okay, I got practice at 10. I'm at the rink at the same time every day, do my thing, practice, work out, go home. Like, I love that kind of routine. I found
You're a robot,
the biggest challenge. Right? What's that?
You said you're a robot. You become such a routine and robot, and everything's got to be the same. And you almost become superstitious to make sure that it is the same, especially when you're rolling, right?
Yeah, I like being a robot. I kind of love that routine aspect of it. I found that was probably the hardest thing going from professional sports to real estate, is just like, you literally don't have anyone telling you what to do. And creating your own routine and creating your own setup that works for you is it is a challenge. Like, it's not an easy thing to just be like, all right, I'm going to become a realtor and I'm going to do this every single day. There is an ebb and flow that you kind of have to figure out for yourself. And what I've tried to do differently, I guess that would carry over from hockey, is really lean on, like, I'm so grateful. I picked our brokerage because of the culture and the people that are here. And I do believe that that's helped me a ton. So leaning on them from a coaching perspective and being like, okay, what do I need to do to be successful? What do I need to do to set up my day? How do I structure this day to, whether it's being a little more mindful and kind of sandwiching all my showings on one day so that the day before I don't need to be running around the city. Little things like that I'm trying to figure out to better protect my time. And also, you know, I have a family, like to have a little more family time has been extremely helpful. And I'm trying to be better at that. The reality is, though, is if someone calls me and they're serious about a property and they want to see it, like, we're going to go see it. And that happens. But if I can control how I set up my day, I definitely will. And yeah, the late nights and the ebb and flows, you just kind of figure it out as you go. And there's no two deals that are alike, and there's no offer presentation that's alike. And it's like playing a game. Like, you could train as much as you want, you could prepare as much as you want, but realistically, like, plays will be similar, but they're always a little bit different. There's always some, like, guys are shooting from different places, lefties, righties, all these aspects of it. You just kind of have to adapt as you go. And it's the same in our business. Yeah.
I can completely agree. Can you talk about a little bit, like we talked about your career before, your career now, like, what do you do in your spare time, and what do you do just away from everybody just to re-energize? Because that's a big part of this business, is to make sure to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people. So what are you doing with the time?
Yeah. Honestly, my honest answer is I'm trying to figure that out. That's my honest answer is I feel like, and that's kind of to my previous point, just being a little more mindful of when I structure my showing days and showing times, and trying to, like, I found, for me anyway, like, if I structure everything kind of in a full day block, and the day before I can be a little more lenient, I find that helps me kind of strategize. One thing I'd love to do better in the next year is just like book in my vacation like now and really just stick to it, book the flight, book it all. It's already in the calendar. It's already happening. Because as you guys know, as the days go, if you don't really have it in the calendar, if it's not in the calendar, it doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
And it's just kind of the reality. So trying to be a little more mindful with that. And I've just built a gym at my house. So trying to get kind of back in shape and get back into a groove in the morning. Like I love mornings. Like that's kind of my time where no one's calling me. No one's, like at 5 a.m., you're not getting emails or phone calls. If you have them, you can definitely respond at 7.
Yeah.
So there's trying to be a little more mindful of that and really take that time as like my time and then just get my day rolling from there. I found typically it's funny how it works, but I find my production also increases when I'm back on that routine.
Is there anything you would do differently or any advice that you'd give someone making that career transition from professional athlete to realtor? I know you talked to Danny a bit. Michael, I believe you're 2 years ahead of Danny, where you retired 2 years ahead of him and made this transition. So you're providing a lot of value to Danny, I know, and advice as he's going through his time. What would you say looking back?
Yeah, well, I think now I do feel something like COVID was a game changer for professional athletes, and the biggest reason is just the online. It forced all these programs to go online. It forced everybody to teach online, and you can. When I went to university in Canadian University at that time, you couldn't do anything online. You had to be in class for 95% of the courses, and the ones that were online were really not great options at the time. We're talking like 2007. So, right, we're almost 20 years later. Now everything's online. So I definitely encourage players, especially as you get older, as the days, like if you practice in the morning and you're done by 1 o'clock and you're just going to go sit on the couch and have a coffee, you can certainly take some education and at least get an idea of what it is you're interested in. And because what I mean, in my example, I was really interested in training and coaching in my early 20s. But then when I retired at 35, I became a realtor. And, I still believe if I would have gone in the coaching route, I would have really enjoyed it. But I also am happy with my decision. I'm very happy with my decision now. So I think there's an element of finding out what you like, spending some time and money into some courses and learning and trying to get an idea of educating yourself and what you want to do. And when I think about it, you can get so much further ahead. Like if someone, for example, was playing, there is a timeline, I believe, like if you go to Humber College for your realtor license, that you have to finish it within, I think it's 2 years.
It is 2 years, yeah.
So for me, I knew, like when I started those courses, I knew I was basically retiring in 2 years. I was 35. I was like, all right, if this team is going to give me another contract for another year, I'll play that out, ride that out into the sunset. But if not, I could be done, or maybe I'll play another year. But I knew I had a timeline. And with Humber, like this is the example I'm using because that's what I went through. Like you could do all your courses online. You could do all your tests from your desk in your house. I don't know if it's still the case today, but at least you've done like a lot of the legwork to get set up so that when you do retire, it's not like, oh no, what am I going to do? Because I'll tell you this, when you do retire, and any athlete knows this, the paychecks stop like that day. So if it's going to take you another 2 years to figure it out, that's a very tough transition of 2 years of figuring it out. So if you can get ahead of it a little bit so that you can use resources, like if someone's in Kingston, I'm sure if they reached out to you guys and said, hey, I'd love to come shadow you during the summer a little bit, like let me come help you. We can all use a little bit of help, I'm sure, like set up lock boxes, go through. There's so many elements of our business that we can use help in. And if there's any players that are like, hey, Mike, I'm in Toronto, would love to come shadow you. I really like real estate. Let me see what the business is all about. Have at it. Like we'd be happy to take someone on and help them out. So I think there's so much resources now that people can lean on, both from an education standpoint, but also in our network of people. Like, hockey is such a small world that you can easily connect with someone in basically any market and try to get an idea of what you actually like.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the last questions here, Uzi, what do you think is going to happen here in the next year or so with all these rate announcements coming up, and we got a lot of optimism coming here in the future, but I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting start to the year. The rate announcement probably literally just happened a couple minutes ago. And I do feel that more so than the rate announcement, the new mortgage rules for our market will play a big factor. With the down payment structure going from 20% down at $1 million to 1.5, that's a huge factor for buyers looking to make a next move or their first move into their first property. But the biggest thing we see in our market was there was kind of like that $1 million tipping point is 20% down at $200,000. That's a lot of savings that someone needs to accumulate to purchase that $1 million property. Now that that's going down to 75,000, that's a huge swing from a down payment perspective starting in a few days. So if somebody either has a property that they're looking to make a step up, and maybe that property hasn't gone up $300,000, maybe it's only gone up $100,000 in 5 or 6 years' time. That's still enough to get them to springboard to the next property. The $1 million mark is where is essentially like the start of the freehold market. That's where you start to see houses. That's when you start to get out of condos. You're getting into townhouses. You're getting into maybe a small bungalow just outside the city. And for us, it is the most competitive market already. The $1 to $1.5 million range is the hottest market in our city. And it makes sense. Like, if you're looking at a semi-detached property, which do you guys have a lot of semis in Kingston?
A fair amount.
Got a few.
Yeah. So here, that's like basically including the basement, like a 2,300 square foot property, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, very standard setup. You see them all over the city, but that's a great property for a family. And that's generally the most desirable property that people want to step into. And they usually cost somewhere between 1 to 1.5. And if you're in a really hot area, you'll start pushing the 2 million mark. So we're essentially going to allow more buyers to get into that, or at least compete for those properties. Because now they don't need to save up $200,000, $220,000, $240,000 just to put the down payment down. It's about $135,000 swing.
Right.
If someone's saving $1,000 a month, that's like 12 years of savings. So I do feel for our market that's going to have a big impact moving forward. I think that it's just going to add a little bit more fuel to that price point. And I mean, that being said, like, we don't know. Like, this is just kind of, if all these things line up well, like, or they line up, that could happen. But I do feel that it will bring more competition to that already competitive pocket of property. And at least for the first part of the year, once everyone revs up and gets excited, and if rates just came down a little bit, it kind of sets it up for a pretty good spring market. And then I think we're going to have a hot spring, and then I think we'll just kind of level off after that, because I think then if prices do go up, any kind of gain in affordability that will happen with this new announcement will kind of get offset, because now the pricing will just kind of, it'll go up. So like, you still have to qualify for those mortgages. So I don't know if it's going to be a long-lived thing, but I do feel we will get a bit of a tide rise, which we generally do in the spring for those properties anyway. Last year in the spring market, like a semi-detached was at 0.8 months of inventory, which is basically every property that came on the market sold within days.
Days. Wild.
So our markets are very different, but similar in the sense that a detached home, the starting price of detached homes that we have in Kingston, it's probably our sweet spot in the market right now, where we're seeing a lot of activity. Difference being, we're like starting point of 500,000 to 600,000.
Okay.
versus I think you said 1 to 1.5 mil.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's similar, but our prices are very different.
Yeah. So the new rules may not have as big of an effect on your market coming forward, but for us, I mean, now your down payment's going from literally on $1 million, 200,000 to 75,000 on Sunday. So that's going to be a big swing. Just from the amount of money needed you still got to service the debt and still got to pay it monthly, but to at least be able to offer on those properties, it's going to unlock.
Get in the door, right, and start building some equity, right? So that's that'll be huge. Yeah, I'm with you. I do think there's going to be a busy spring. There's going to be a big push, but hopefully it's not too big of a push where it just drives the price up even further, and it's just gets even more attainable. So hopefully we can hit like a little bit of a happy medium here. But
I don't know if those two things exist sometimes. It's like if you get the big push, you bring more activity, which will inevitably prices will reflect on that over time. But there is still a good amount of inventory out there that still would need to get absorbed as we go. And I think the big X factor is how much inventory is going to come to market in the spring. Yeah. And I think that's going to be it's the only way that's going to offset the demand that's out there. If that demand picks up is if the inventory comes. And if it does come up, like usually what we've been seeing in the last couple of years anyway, is that inventory is very tight, January, February, March, and then inventory spikes in April. So once the prices start to move, and maybe sellers at that point are like, okay, now, the price has gone up, they all come to market. And then we're seeing more inventory kind of at the same time. And I feel like that's kind of where things balance out a little bit. I don't know what to expect for 2025, but it may happen here as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we're all thinking the same thing with the spring for sure. And this off with a little puck talk, some stuff that I've seen recently. The teddy bear toss in Ottawa. Did you guys see this clip?
Yeah.
As the Bears were coming down, a huge brawl erupted after the goal.
Pretty funny.
Oh, wild. And then the other one that I saw yesterday is the Oshawa Generals are first in the East. I love following OHL hockey, by the way. The Oshawa Generals are first in the East, and they fired their coach, Steve O'Rourke. Did you guys see that one?
No,
there's got to be more to that story that we may eventually hear. You guys ever seen that before?
Not very often when the team's in first place and then the coach gets fired. So I'm sure there'll be more news coming out of Oshawa on that. But Uzi,
maybe we'll be able to keep it under wraps, but there's got to be something behind the scenes there.
Yeah. Uzi, being a goalie, Canadian, who do you got starting game one in the Four Nations? And
I think Bennington's a no-brainer there.
No-brainer.
For who's on the team. I'm surprised they wouldn't have given Fleury a shot, at least just to be on the roster, being the legend that he is now at this point. Like, I do feel he's still playing really high level right now, but yeah, tough to say. But yeah, Binnington, no-brainer. He obviously has the most experience, and he's won before, and his compete level is so good. So I think he'll be really good in that tournament.
Yeah.
Funny
also
thing here, I'm going to reel this back probably 4 episodes, Danny. When we first brought this up, you did not have him on your list, but I
Binnington?
did.
No, I didn't. No,
yeah,
but he's a John boy, eh?
Who else did you have on the list?
I had Aiden Hill, Logan Thompson, and the Montembeault.
Yeah, Thompson would have been a good play. Good goalie.
Yeah, but I mean, he's just young, and Binnington's won a cup. Like obviously, Thompson was kind of along for the ride on that. So you just hope that these goalies, they find another level there, because this Four Nations, I am so excited to watch this kind of hockey. It is going to be so fast. Really looking forward to that. And just so these goalies around the world, they're going to be in tough to make sure that they not that they need to steal a game, but just don't lose the game, right? Because that's a big difference between those two. But
absolutely,
yeah.
I'm wondering if this is totally off topic, and I'd actually like to ask you guys. I wonder if you think the new NCAA rule with the OHL will have a better effect on Canadian goaltending moving forward.
Ooh, I never thought of that. We've discussed it
Yeah.
on our podcast before, but you guys, I mean, the two of you guys will have way more insight than I will on this one. So I'll step back and listen to you guys on that.
I think it starts at the youth level, to be honest with you. Like, you look at all these goalies that are in the United States or in Russia, like it's much more affordable down there. And I think there's more coaching provided. Like here in Canada, it is extremely expensive, not only for gear, but for coaching. And it's unattainable for most families. So for countries like Sweden, Finland, Russia, and parts of the US, like it's part of the organization fee that they just get that much attention. So like here in Kingston's pretty good, but I can just say that most centers just don't have that, specific attention to the goaltender. So I think that's where you need to start before you hit even the OHL and NCAA. The other thing I got to say about that is just because you can go to the NCAA doesn't necessarily mean that the OHL players can qualify to get there, because you need to be good at school and you'll need to write the SAT. So just because you can go that route does not mean you'll be eligible based on obviously your smarts. So there's a lot of moving parts on that, but I'm glad that they're able to. So like even a guy like Shane Wright, for instance, he played in the OHL for about 5 years where he couldn't go to the American League because he wasn't eligible based on where he's from. But the NCAA would have been a great option if he's, qualified, has his SATs, and he can go play at a BU or a BC, which is better than what the OHL can provide, but not yet the AHL. So it's gonna be great for the players because you're giving more power to them to be able to play at a higher level and decide where they want to go. So it's gonna be good.
So I've asked this question before, but I'll ask it again. Who do you guys think this new eligibility rule will benefit more, whether it be the CHL or the NCAA? And I also want to throw one more in there, and I believe it's got to hurt CIS hockey.
Yeah, I mean, I played in the CIS, so I played at University of New Brunswick. So, I went that route after the OHL. I think from twofold perspective, I totally agree with Danny on the goalie training at a youth level and making it a little more accessible for kids will be a big step. I think one thing that will benefit goalies because I was thinking about this, if you're a goalie and you're playing the OHL, your runway is quite short. Like really you have until you're 19 to get a contract. You might get one at 20 and then you're going to pro at 20, 21. It's really tough to go pro at 20, 21 versus someone at NCAA going at 22, 23. So I do feel that element of giving a little more runway at the highest level you can, because once you go CIS, like there's a handful of teams that are very competitive, but otherwise, I mean, it's not a league that gets a lot of respect around the world. And it makes sense because, there's so many teams that are just not very good. So the top teams are still able to provide, get players are still signing out of those teams and getting an opportunity at pro. But if these players can go NCAA, continue kind of their path or trajectory of getting better, have a longer runway, especially as a goalie, like, and Tails, you remember, like if you're not playing by the time you're 18, like it's tough to get drafted. And then you kind of have 1 or 2 years and then you basically, you're going to CIS or you're going to the coast. 100%. So now if you have a really good 19 year, you can maybe get something at like a BU or a better school and go play NCAA. And I'd argue if you have a really good year at 19 in the OHL, you could play at that level too and be really successful. And I think that if you can make that step and now all of a sudden your progression keeps going, I think it'll give you a better runway going into pro. And I do feel it'd be beneficial from a Canadian goaltending perspective of these guys now have, instead of kind of their runway stopping at 20, now their runway can go to 22, 23 at the best level.
Sure.
And maybe that's when they can develop a little more. And when they go pro at 22, they're seen as a pro at 22 out of NCAA versus at a CIS, or they've been in the coast for 2 years, grinding on an East Coast deal.
For sure. And honestly, if they're not ready by the end of 4 years university and they had 3 years in the OHL and they're not ready for the pro game,
that's it.
It's probably not for you, right? Like, but at least you
Yeah.
got your education, and then you can kind of go your own way. And like, what a runway to out of the game too. So it's
Yeah, and if you look at the American goalies, they've all been able to turn pro like a little bit later, it feels like, right? Like they're not rushed into pro at 20. They got 20, 21. If they're exceptional, of course, they go a bit earlier. But that I think that'll be a big plus for Canadian goaltending, I think.
big time. Yeah.
And Michael, we really appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. It's been
fun.
a long time coming. Yeah, absolutely.
I've asked Tails to come on my podcast like 20 times. He always says no. So
It's twice. I still need to get on there.
yeah,
Let's do it after Christmas, buddy.
sounds
He's a
good.
veteran now. He's ready to go.
That's it. You guys have the nice setups there, so it's good. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure.
It's always great
Thanks
to
for the
connect
chat.
with other realtors too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks again, Michael Ouzas, Toronto-based realtor. Who's your brokerage?
Royal LePage Signature.
From Royal LePage Signature. Again, Michael Ouzas, Pucks, Putts, and Properties. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
That's episode 7 of Pucks, Putts, and Properties. We want to thank Melissa Forman for leading us off with a mortgage update, and Michael Ouzas, Toronto-based realtor, and much like Danny, ex-pro hockey goalie. Amazing guest that we had on today, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, great week, and great Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Two real estate agents of romance, so true. Danny and Mark, seeing them through. Mark the curler, the golfer, the fisherman bold. Danny the goalie, with a story to be told.